On June 30, 1962, a resident of the village of Voznesenka, located in the Berezovsky district of the Krasnoyarsk territory, witnessed a strange incident. In the cloudless sky, he noticed a bright, shiny object that was distorting the sun's rays. The craft was moving along an unnatural trajectory, and it soon became clear that it was rapidly losing altitude. According to the eyewitness, a smoky trail trailed behind the object, as if indicating a malfunction or fire. A few moments later, the aircraft entered a dive mode. Its behavior became chaotic, and it crashed with a bang into a forest near the village. Local residents who rushed to the site of the alleged crash were met by columns of military equipment rushing in the same direction. The area around the accident site was cordoned off almost instantly. The military quickly blocked all approaches and set up patrols. The crash site literally turned into an exclusion zone. Locals were not allowed within a kilometer, and checks, interrogations, and silent clearing of the area began. The first rumors began to spread in the village. They said that a passenger plane had crashed, possibly with dozens of people on board. However, this version seemed strange. No one had ever seen such a powerful military presence before, even during military exercises. Later it became known that on that day, a Tu-104A, the first Soviet jet passenger plane and the third in the world after the British Comet and the American Boeing 707, had indeed crashed in the Krasnoyarsk region. The United Kingdom is rightly considered the pioneer in the creation of commercial jet airliners. It was here, in 1949, that the de Havilland D.H.106 Comet took to the skies, the world's first jet passenger aircraft designed for short and medium-haul flights. It was a real breakthrough in world aviation. The speed, comfort, and quietness of jet engines promised a revolution in air travel. However, the Comet's fate turned out to be tragic. Exactly 13 days after its debut, Canada presented its project, the Avro Canada C-102 jetliner, also designed for medium-haul routes. It was the second jet passenger aircraft in history and was almost 8 years ahead of its American competitors. But both countries soon dropped out of the race. After a series of disasters caused by design flaws, in particular, the weakness of the fuselage at the points where the windows were attached, the UK was forced to suspend all Comet flights. The aircraft literally broke apart in the air at altitude, which was a powerful blow to the project's reputation. In Canada, despite the successful testing of the C-102, the government concluded that it was more profitable to develop military aviation. The project was shut down, and Avro focused on the production of fighter jets, including the promising CF-100 Canuck. Against this backdrop, the Soviet Union made an impressive leap forward. In June 1955, the Tu-104 took to the skies, the first Soviet jet passenger aircraft, based on the proven Tu-16 military bomber. The aircraft proved to be reliable, spacious, and well-suited for regular flights. By 1956, the Tu-104 had become the only jet passenger aircraft in operation in the world, giving the USSR a significant technological and ideological advantage in the Cold War. It was not until 1957 that the Boeing 707, a four-engine jet airliner that would later become a symbol of a new era in civil aviation, made its first flight in the United States. It entered service in October 1958, marking the beginning of the global dominance of American civil aviation. Thus, from 1956 to 1959, the Tu-104 remained virtually a monopoly in jet passenger aviation. The Tu-104 aircraft, which had 8 crew members and 76 passengers on board that day, was one of the serial models produced at the Omsk plant number 166. It became a symbol of Soviet engineering breakthrough, as it was based on the Tu-16 military long-range bomber, a powerful machine that had proven itself in the Air Force. The Tu-104 inherited key design elements from it: the wing, engine nacelles, landing gear, tail unit, and AM-3 turbojet engines. But now it was not a combat aircraft, but the flagship of the USSR's civil aviation, designed to impress the world. The Tu-104 made its first truly stunning impression in 1956, when First Secretary of the CPSU Central Committee Nikita Sergeyevich Khrushchev arrived in London on a visit. 3 Tu-104s flew in with him, and it was a real sensation. English pilots, technicians, and even military observers were amazed that the Soviet Union was the first in the world to organize regular flights on jet aircraft, while other powers were only trying to iron out the flaws in their designs. 2 years later, the same aircraft, a Tu-104 with serial number 1301, was assigned another task. It was transferred to the main directorate of the Civil Air Fleet and incorporated into the 202nd Jet Aircraft Squadron in Khabarovsk, which served routes between the Far Eastern regions and the capital. On June 30, 1962, this aircraft was performing a scheduled flight on the Khabarovsk-Moscow route with intermediate stops. After taking off from Irkutsk at 1550, it set course for the next point on the route, Omsk. The flight conditions were excellent. The Krasnoyarsk Control Center reported cloud cover with an upper limit at an altitude of 9 kilometers, but overall, the weather conditions were not a cause for concern. At 16:30, the crew reported that they were 5 kilometers from Krasnoyarsk and everything was going according to schedule. However, 20 minutes later, the calm was broken by an alarm signal. The co-pilot of the Tu-104 came on the radio. His voice sounded excited and tense, and he said, 42 to 370, follow me, watch me. After which there was an indistinct rumble on the air, and communication with the plane was suddenly lost. Air traffic controllers were in shock. Radio communications were interrupted by the co-pilot's alarming phrase, and then the call sign 42-370, the registration code of the Tu-104, disappeared from the airwaves forever. For a few more seconds, radar screens showed the plane rapidly losing altitude. The flight path indicated that the airliner had entered an uncontrolled descent. The crew did not respond to communications or to requests from air traffic controllers. Then the Tu-104 disappeared from the screens, at a point several kilometers from Krasnoyarsk. According to radar observations, the aircraft, which was at an altitude of 9,000 meters, suddenly began to descend with a sharp bank. The crew then attempted to turn, but the bank only increased. The aircraft went into a tailspin and moments later crashed into a valley covered with dense forest at an angle of about 40 degrees. The impact was so powerful that the aircraft literally crashed into the ground, forming a large crater, and the fuselage broke into small pieces. Parts of the airliner and passengers' personal belongings were scattered within a radius of hundreds of meters around the crash site. An hour after the tragedy, Army units arrived at the scene. The area was immediately cordoned off, and no civilians were allowed to enter. The investigation was entrusted to a special state commission, which included representatives of the Civil Air Fleet, the Ministry of Defense, the KGB, and aircraft manufacturers. When experts began examining the remains, they immediately noticed the unusual nature of the injuries sustained by the victims. Many of the bodies were partially burned, with the burns concentrated mainly on the left side of the body. Moreover, these burns were inflicted while the victims were still alive, which indicated the presence of a source of fire even before the crash. In addition, experts noted that all the victims were in a seated position, strapped in, which indicated the suddenness of the incident. No one tried to stand up or leave their seat. The commission also noted damaged treetops near the crash site, which meant that the plane began to lose control while still in the air, descending in a gentle trajectory rather than vertically, as would be the case with a complete system failure. Nevertheless, the results of the investigation did not provide a clear answer. Shortly after a detailed examination of the remains of the victims, experts discovered an alarming fact. High levels of carbon monoxide were found in the lungs of most passengers. This clearly indicated that a fire had indeed broken out on board the Tu-104 even before the crash. Another important finding was traces of burns and charring in the area of the left engine. All this suggested that the fire started in this part of the aircraft. The Accident Investigation Commission put forward a working hypothesis. The fire caused an emergency descent, and then, under stressful conditions, thick cloud cover, and possibly a loss of power, the crew lost their spatial orientation, causing the aircraft to go into a tailspin and crash. Moreover, investigators began to accuse the pilots themselves of failing to orient themselves properly in an emergency situation. Another version was careless handling of fire on board. Allegedly, one of the passengers was secretly smoking, which caused a fire in the cabin. However, the situation changed dramatically after the intervention of a representative of the Tupolev Design Bureau. The deputy head of the Design Bureau, with his high qualifications and engineering intuition, began his own study of the fuselage fragments. He was the first to notice extremely strange damage to the metal skin on the left side. On one of the fragments, he discovered a perfectly round hole about 20 centimeters in diameter. This hole struck him not only by its shape, but also by the nature of the damage. The inside of the skin was charred, while the outside was almost undamaged. This meant only one thing: the destructive factor did not come from outside, but from inside. Some object pierced the aircraft's outer skin, penetrated the fuselage, and exploded inside, causing a fire, damage, and, as a result, loss of control. A logical question arose. What was this object? Then previously classified data began to surface. It turned out that on that very day, June 30, 1962, scheduled exercises of one of the air defense units stationed in the Berezovsky district of the Krasnoyarsk region were taking place in the immediate vicinity of the Tu-104's flight path. During these exercises, anti-aircraft guided missiles were launched. After another launch, one of the anti-aircraft missiles, according to preliminary data, lost its training target as a result of a guidance failure and reoriented itself toward a civilian airliner nearby. The very fact that a passenger plane was hit by an air defense missile seems unlikely, but there are technical grounds for this hypothesis. The fact is that the air defense systems existing in the USSR at that time, in particular the S-75 and S-125, were not equipped with modern homing systems. Instead, they used what's called radio command guidance. An operator on the ground tracked both the target and the missile and manually guided it to the target using radio signals. This required a high level of skill, and in training, or if something went wrong, even a small mistake could lead to tragedy. According to a number of experts, this is precisely the scenario that could have occurred in the Krasnoyarsk region on June 30, 1962. A missile launched during the exercises was mistakenly redirected not to the target, but to a Tu-104 airliner that was in the air near the firing range. However, there is another, equally alarming but much more secretive version of the disaster, which has been supported by many military experts over the years. According to this version, the Tu-104 airliner, for unknown reasons, deviated slightly from its flight path and began to approach an area marked on maps as completely closed. This was a top-secret facility called Krasnoyarsk 26, also known by the code names Sotsgorod, Devyatka, or Atomgrad. This settlement was not even listed on the official geographical maps of the Soviet Union and was a strictly guarded closed city, where one of the key complexes for the production of weapons-grade plutonium, the most important component of the USSR's nuclear arsenal, was located. The physical security of the facility was ensured by a comprehensive system. The area was protected by a multi-level security system, including not only ground units, but also special air defense forces capable of destroying any target, even if it accidentally crossed the forbidden border. The approach of a civilian aircraft to such a facility was automatically considered a potential threat, especially during the Cold War, when no one ruled out the possibility of espionage or terrorist activity. Some experts suggest that when the military detected the plane's deviation from its route and its approach to Krasnoyarsk 26, they decided to destroy the target without waiting for confirmation. At that moment, the officers on duty may have had no more than 30 seconds to make a decision. Given the secrecy of the facility, no one cared whether it was a passenger plane or not. The order was clear: the target was approaching the facility and had to be destroyed. Either way, the missile was launched, and the Tu-104 was hit in midair. The official causes of the disaster have not yet been made public and remain classified as top secret. The Commission's final conclusion was extremely vague, without specific accusations or technical explanations, which only reinforces suspicions. To this day, The investigation materials remain in the classified archives of the Ministry of Defense. Many eyewitnesses to the tragedy, including residents of nearby villages, never learned the truth about what happened. Among aviation and air defense veterans, this plane crash remains one of the darkest and most mysterious pages in Soviet history.